Alex, I was out in the driveway yesterday and I saw my neighbor, bless his heart, trying to stop his sedan at the end of the hill. The sound was like a giant celestial zipper being pulled shut by a very angry freight train, just that high pitched metallic shriek that makes your teeth want to vacate your gums.
Oh, I know that sound. That's the I've been ignoring my car's text messages for 6 months sound. It's basically the automotive equivalent of a smoke detector with a dying battery. But instead of a chirp, it's a scream for mercy.
Precisely. And it got me thinking. We spend so much time in the Tiger Den talking about dovetails and TIG welding beads, but the most important maker skill most people will ever actually need is making sure they don't roll through a red light because they treated their brake pads like a suggested donation at a museum.
Well, as much as I love watching you yell at your table saw, I think the audience would appreciate not crashing into a ditch. So, today we're diving into the oily, gritty, incredibly satisfying world of brake maintenance. Tiger, honestly, on a scale of changing a light bulb to rebuilding a clock, how hard is a basic brake job?
Honestly, if you can build a birdhouse that doesn't fall out of the tree, you can change your own pads. It's pure mechanical logic. It's like a puzzle where all the pieces are covered in carbon dust and frustration. But before we even touch a lug nut, we have to talk about the golden rule of playing with things that weigh 2 tons. I have a very vivid memory of my first solo brake job when I was 19. I was impatient. I had the car up on a flimsy scissor jack that came with the spare tire, what I like to call the Widowmaker, and I didn't bother with jack stands because I was only going to be under there for a second.
Tiger, please tell me you didn't.
I reached into the wheel well, and just as I gave the caliper bolt a good yank, the car shivered. That jack didn't collapse, but it tilted just enough to let me know that if I stayed under there, I was going to become a human panini. I spent the next 10 minutes sitting on the curb, just shaking.
See, this is why I keep you around. You've survived the stuff, so we don't have to. So, lesson 1. Jack stands are not optional equipment. They are the only thing standing between you and a very flat morning.
Exactly. You want that car supported by steel, not hydraulics. Hydraulics can fail without a sound. Steel doesn't get tired. And for the love of all things holy, chalk your wheels. Put a brick, a piece of 4x4, or an actual wheel chalk behind the tires, staying on the ground. Cars have a funny way of wanting to go for a stroll when you've got them up in the air.
Okay, safety sermon over. Let's get into the guts of it. Most folks hear brakes and they think of one thing, but there's a whole ecosystem in there. Crack the hood for us. Where does the magic start?
It all starts at the master cylinder. Imagine your brake pedal as a giant syringe. When you step on it, you're pushing fluid through a set of steel veins. Physics is beautiful because liquid doesn't like to be squeezed. It resists. So that pressure travels all the way down to the wheels to do the heavy lifting.
Which brings us to the pads and rotors duo, the Batman and Robin of stopping.
Right, the rotor is that shiny metal disc that spins with your wheel. The caliper is like a big iron hand that sits over the edge of that disc. Inside that hand are the pads, the flesh of the hand, if you will. When you hit the brakes, the caliper squeezes those pads against the spinning disc. Friction turns that motion into heat, and that heat is what stops you.
And that's where the wear happens. It's basically a controlled exercise in sanding down a piece of metal every time you hit a red light.
Spot on. Now, if you're wondering when to jump in, your car usually tells you in 3 languages. First is squeak. Most pads have a little metal tab called a wear indicator. When the pad gets too thin, that tab touches the rotor and makes a sound like a flute played by a manic pixie.
I've heard that one. What's language number 2?
The shakes. If you press the brake and your steering wheel feels like it's trying to escape your hands, that's a warped rotor. It's not flat anymore, it's wavy. And the third is the mush. If your pedal feels like you're stepping into an oversized bowl of mashed potatoes, you've got air in your lines or your fluid is ancient.
Speaking of ancient, I looked at a neighbor's brake fluid once and it looked like used French fry oil, like dark brown and murky. That shouldn't happen, right?
God, no. Brake fluid is hygroscopic. That's a fancy way of saying it's like a sponge for moisture in the air. Over years, water seeps in. Water boils at 212 degrees. Brakes get way hotter than that. If that water turns to steam inside your lines, steam compresses, your pedal goes to the floor, and suddenly you're a passenger in your own disaster movie.
Okay, so we've got our jack stands, we've got our new pads, and we're looking at the wheel. What's the Tiger's secret for actually getting those old pads out without losing a finger or a sanity?
The first thing is the C-clamp trick. When you take the caliper off, the piston, the part that does the squeezing, is still stuck out in the worn down position. You can't fit nice, fat, new pads into that narrow gap. You take an old pad, put it against the piston, and use a C-clamp to gently, slowly push that piston back into its housing.
Wait, I've seen people just hammer those back.
Don't ever let me see you do that. You'll score the bore or flip a seal. It's a slow dance, not a cage match. And here's a tip most manuals won't emphasize enough. Open your master cylinder cap before you do this. You're pushing fluid back up the system. It needs somewhere for the air to go. If the reservoir is full to the brim, you might end up with a brake fluid fountain on your paint, and that stuff eats paint for breakfast.
Good to know. Paint is expensive, brake fluid is cheap. Now, what about the goop? Every time I go to the auto parts store, they try to sell me those little packets of purple or orange grease at the counter. Is that just an upsell, or do I actually need to lubricate things that are supposed to create friction?
It sounds counterintuitive, doesn't it? Grease your brakes. But it's vital. You don't put it on the face of the pad, the part that touches the rotor. Please, never do that unless you want to sail through your garage wall. You put it on the sliding pins. The caliper has to float back and forth. If those pins get dry and crusty, the caliper sticks. One pad wears down to the metal, while the other looks brand new, and your car pulls to the left like it's looking for a snack.
So, lube the pins, but keep the faces dry. Got it. What about the rotors themselves? Do you always replace them, or can you just give them a scrub?
It's the, should I sand the floor or just mop it? Debate. If the rotors are thick enough and not warped, a shop can turn them, basically put them on a lathe and shave off a hair of metal to make them perfectly flat. But honestly, these days, for most commuter cars, new rotors are so affordable that I usually just swap them. If you see deep grooves, like a vinyl record, don't even think about it. Throw them in the scrap pile and start fresh.
You're making this sound suspiciously doable, Tiger. There has to be a gotcha. What's the mistake that makes you want to hang up your coveralls?
It's the caliper hang. People take the caliper off the rotor, and then they just let it dangle by the rubber brake hose. That hose isn't a bungee cord. It's carrying high-pressure fluid. If you let that heavy metal chunk hang there, you can cause internal tears in the hose. Then, 6 months later, it fails. I always have a piece of wire or even a coat hanger ready to tie the caliper up to the suspension spring. Give it a little hammock.
A caliper hammock. I like that. It's all about being kind to the components.
Always. And the final boss of the brake job, the test drive. I've seen guys do a perfect job, drop the car, put it in gear, and roll right into their workbench because they forgot to pump the pedal.
Wait, why?
Remember how we pushed that piston back with the C-clamp? There's now a huge gap between the pad and the rotor. The first 3 or 4 times you hit the brake pedal, it's just moving the piston back into position. It won't actually stop the car. You have to sit there in the driveway and pump that pedal until it feels firm before you even think about putting it in reverse.
I'm imagining you slowly rolling backward into a trash can while frantically pumping the pedal.
It wasn't a trash can, Alex. It was a very expensive rose bush. My wife still reminds me about it every spring when it blooms slightly crooked.
There it is, the Tiger tuition fee.
Every time. But look, the takeaway here isn't just about saving $100 in labor. It's about that feeling of independence. When you're driving down a mountain pass and you feel those brakes bite exactly how they're supposed to, and you know exactly why they're doing it because you're the one who greased the pins and torqued the bolts. There's a peace of mind there you can't buy.
It turns the car from a black box of mystery into a machine you're actually in a partnership with.
Exactly. So next time you hear that little chirp or squeak from your wheels, don't turn up the radio. Pull the wheel off, take a look. It's just nuts and bolts, and they're all just waiting for you to show them some attention.
Well said. I think I'm actually going to go check my reservoir after this, just to make sure it's not French fry colored.
Better safe than crooked rose bushes, Alex. Better safe than that.